Chapter 23, Corruption. February 25, 2010. Dear Yukari. It always somewhat bothered me to think that such a company could do research like it did and be completely unnoticed by the rest of the world. Especially when it had affected the world so much. Who is to say what other places of the world know of the dark hour or shadows or even persona? Maybe we are the ones that are in the dark and halfway across the globe some has it all figured out. Then again, how would anyone reach out and talk with those people? It isn't like you go to some forum on the internet and post "I fight monsters in an unseen time with a power that is actually a facet of my personality" and expect to get more than a lol what kind of response to it. There is a lot I wanted to investigate. A lot that I wanted to find out for myself. The nature of shadows. The true reason why these aspects even exist. How is it that the unconscious of humanity is capable of manifesting itself in the first place? Yet the truth of what happened cannot be denied. Humanity's desire for death. That small thought that lingers in the back of people's minds of escape from mortality. Who would have thought it was powerful enough to summon a goddess? Yet all I could do was put humanity's desire under lock and key to prevent it from happening. It will take more than just us to stop the fall. And even if it isn't in our lifetime, our children's lifetime. Or even theirs. It could be generation upon generations of people before the fall will happen. But eventually the seal will erode and break. Will the world be ready for it when it happens? Or will someone like me have to make the sacrifice again? Who knows? Maybe I'm not the first person to make this sacrifice. There are plenty of mythological stories that end this same way. Perhaps they weren't myth at all. After all, all myth starts from a grain of truth. Either way, I will stand strong. And I won't waver. I made my choice of my own free will. So I will always be here to stand against the wish of death. If only for the few people in the world that choose to live. Love always. Risotto Minato. November 4, 2009, Dark Hour. Minato wish he could say he was surprised by this development, that he hadn't seen any of this coming. But no, as a matter of fact he had predicted it. However, he had kept his doubts and suspicions to himself because he wanted to have solid proof to his reasoning. Just like why he had never trusted the man Shuji Akatsuki. So when they saw him standing there with Aegis in front of Tartarus, Minato could only swear at himself for not trusting his instincts more. Not to mention he now had Aegis under his control. The shock and surprise of the others on seas was about as much as Minato had expected, but to see that asshole standing as if it had all been a part of a scheme he created just made Minato sick. The man had no right to claim as if it was all as he had intended. No. Minato had put the last pieces of the puzzle together rather quickly thanks to some insights from Mitsuru's father. But all of that had come too late. He found himself staring into the unfeeling eyes of Aegis. Obviously he had taken direct control of her in some fashion. That would make this more difficult. With her capacity, Minato had taken the time to make sure Siegfried was his primary persona. If anything, he would be able to last longer against the mechanical maiden. Everything is as I planned. It is not unexpected that the Dark Hour and Tartarus remain. In fact, I never intended for you to rid the world of them. Quite the opposite, actually. Akatsuki grin made Minato's skin crawl. What do you mean? Fuka pushed. The 12 shadows were parts of a whole. They were destined to be reunited. And that was accomplished in no small part, thanks to your efforts. Soon, Death, the Almighty, shall arise and bring forth the fall. Akatsuki laughed. Death? Ken sounded confused, as did most of C's. Minato, however, found all the pieces falling into place. The things Igor had said. And Pharos. All of it was connected in more ways than he could possibly have imagined. Why not add a little bit of a crazed fanaticism to the fun? All of this was related to 10 years ago. And those events is what put all of this in motion. No. More than likely the events of back then actually prevented things from happening. 10 years ago. Haitu was a scientist for the project we've spoken of. The experiment went awry, but that is not why the Dark Hour or Tartarus was born. They manifested as a result of harvesting the Shadow's power. Just as the experiment was designed to do. That is why your grandfather gathered so many shadows. To bring about the fall, Ikatsuki turned his sinister stare to Mitsuru. That can't be, Mitsuru stumbled. People have filled the world, yet turn it into a void. The only hope of salvation lies in ruin. According to the prophecy. The fall will be orchestrated by the prince. And once the prince has delivered us all, he shall rule the new world as king. The man who tried it 10 years ago failed. But I will not, I shall succeed. Ikatsuki had obviously believed in this so strongly that he would wait years for things to align to his benefit. The exception being that the people that were in his way previously were now dead. All of them. Man, he's totally lost it. Junpei muttered. No, Minato shook his head. He's always been this way. He simply deceived us until things were in his favor. I apologize for deceiving you, but this was for your sake as well. If you follow me for just a little while longer, you, too, will find salvation. Ikatsuki spread his arms out as if he was the savior. The one that had all the answers. Minato's anger grew exponentially. You call that salvation? Fuka was the one to speak back first. I have a question for you. Yukari spoke softly at first. Yes? Ikatsuki somehow looked like it was his obligation to answer all he could. Well, his intentions were to have us join him, not fight him after all. In the video from my father. He said to defeat the shadows. Was that a lie, too? Yukari was shaking, she was angry. Frustrated. Probably more than that. But Minato had to stay focused. If he let his emotions run away from himself, then. He did record that himself. Of course, I had to make some modifications. Ikatsuki frowned as if irritated by the memory. You doctored it? Mitsuru accused him. I corrected it. Your father was a superb scientist. He may not have known it, but I truly respected him. While others focused on the Shadow's abilities, he explored more important things. But unfortunately, he could not comprehend the magnificent potential of the fall. Ikatsuki was too proud of his belief in the fall. Minato could quickly see how the events played out. What Yukari's father had really done saved them. And the real intention was to let the shadows be. What? Yukari was quickly falling apart next to Minato. He took a moment to stand next to her and grab her hand. She looked at him and he merely shook his head. Do not listen to him. The truth is, your father is the reason why either of us is standing here today. Isn't that right, Ikatsuki? Yukari's father figured out the truth of what would happen and he sabotaged the lab. Using the knowledge he had gained about the shadows, he used it to split the larger shadow and more than likely caused a large explosion in the lab for a simple reason. Minato narrowed his eyes at Ikatsuki. He eliminated all the research information so that anyone left would be unable to simply pick up where they were before. That was why in the end you had to use us. You couldn't make heads or tails on how to get the shadows together, so you were forced to wait. Rosato, you have been quite useful, but you're too much trouble to keep around. Ikatsuki glared at Minato. I had hoped you would all see the light. Seeing your faces, I believe I am just wasting my time. But, you are just children, after all. I suppose it can't be helped. Aegis. The time has come for you to fulfill your role. Capture them, and prepare them to be sacrificed. Minato noticed as Ikatsuki pushed something on a remote of some sort. He couldn't react fast enough. Aegis quickly jumped forward and took out Fuka first. Smart, take out the analyzer first. Mitsuru was taken down next before she could properly react. Minato pulled out his sword and pushed Yukari behind him. Aegis could always be repaired, but it didn't make this easier. One by one C's fell to the mechanical maiden until it was Aegis, Minato and Yukari were all that was left. I'm sorry, Aegis. I know this is hurting you right now. That is why you have to fight this. The fact you have a persona proves that you are more than some machine that follows orders. Minato spoke as Aegis charged with a blinding speed. He met her head-on and pushed away an attack meant to catch him in the solar plexus. He spun and brought his katana down hard, but Aegis crossed her arms and turned, stopping the blade. "You can't hold back if you are going to take me down." Minato growled as he switched persona. Thor. The blast of electricity knocked the mechanical maiden back and off her feet. "Aegis, enable Orja mode," Ikatsuki grinned as he pushed up his glasses. Orja mode activated, Aegis' mechanical voice spoke as she got back to her feet. "Minato." Yukari said from behind him. "Don't worry, we'll make it through this," he said comfortingly. Minato knew, however, that he couldn't keep up with Aegis' speed, which was why he had to get her to expend her Orja mode. It would be some time before she could use it again. It forced Ikatsuki to use his trump card sooner than he had planned. Aegis moved faster than his eyes could follow, and before he knew it he heard Yukari collapsing to the ground, unconscious like the others. Minato surveyed the other C's members. Aegis had subdued them but had also not injured them in any sufficient way. This made Minato smile as a realization crossed his mind. He sheathed his sword and tossed it onto the ground. "Giving up so soon?" Ikatsuki seemed amused. "Hardly," Minato let himself chuckle. "Tonight won't go as you plan, Ikatsuki. And I can't wait to see your face the moment you realize it." Then he felt Aegis strike him from behind and Minato's world faded to darkness. March 16, 2011, Pseudo-Dark Hour. "Guess that answers the question on if he is here or not," Junpei said as he stepped out of the ramen shop. "We should head to the Rosada residence. He may have already made his move on the family," Mitsuru urged the others. Kana watched as Hamuko was looking up into the sky. The moon would be full any day now. I wonder how many times Onii-chan looked up to the moon in the dark hour. How can something so far away look so menacingly to the world? "He's up there, you know," Yukari said, appearing on the other side of Hamuko. "I imagine that somewhere between here and the moon is where the Great Seal is. I'm sure he can see us and how much you're fighting." "You too, you know," Hamuko smiled and put her arm around Yukari's waist. "It must have been so hard dealing with your pregnancy and going to high school. There must have been a lot of rumors and gossip behind your back. What I'm dealing with is nothing compared to that battle. A lot of people were bad-mouthing Minato all the time. I just got so angry that I would lash out. I ended up relying heavily on Mitsuru and my mom. I was all over the place in how I felt about the baby for a long time. I would go from happy to angry and then depressed. I'm sure part of it was the pregnancy, but I also never took the time to grieve properly for Minato's death. It wasn't until Kokoro was born when I finally dealt with all of that. I'm glad I went through with it. He left me with an amazing gift." Yukari smiled, looking over to Hamuko. "Thank you, Takahashi." Hamuko shook her head. "Just call me Hamuko. We're basically sisters anyway." She grinned. "You were going to marry my brother after all." "You're right. I've always wanted a sister," Yukari giggled before handing over Hamuko's Naginata. "Don't forget we have Kana-chan as a sister too," Hamuko said, pulling Kana into their embrace. "Sisters?" Kana's eyes went big, surprised by the sudden sentiment. "Yep, you too, Kana-chan," Yukari smiled. "Now let's stop Yoshimitsu before he can harm any more of Onii-chan's family," Hamuko said, putting her hand in the middle. Yukari put her hand over Hamuko and they both looked at Kana. Kana was hesitant for a moment and probably confused, but then put her hand in as well. "I'll do my best. This is for all of us. So we can live our lives no longer clouded by lies and deception," Hamuko said, looking at Yukari and then Kana. "And for Minato, so that he can watch all of us be happy in our lives. Continuing the fight against the fall. So that one day we can all be with him." Yukari smiled warmly. Then suddenly many other hands added themselves to the circle. "Don't think you can leave us out of this," Akihiko said. "We'll all see this to the end. We will find the truth of everything so that way when we see him again, we can hold our heads up high and tell him that we did it. That we finished everything," Mitsuru said. "So we can all one day have many stories to tell him," Aegis added. "For our leader, Minato!" Junpei yelled out. "Minato!" They all yelled in unison. Hamuko couldn't help be overwhelmed by the emotions that flooded her. All of them had been affected by her brother's presence. She felt a mixture of pride and sadness. Proud to have had a brother that was loved so deeply by the people around him. And sadness that she had only ever seen him in dreams. She would never know him like they did. "Yes, for Minato," a new voice said some distance away from them. They all turned towards the source and saw the man Yoshimitsu casually walking towards them and clapping his hands in a mocking manner. "The fall itself never interested me. No, what interests me is the power capable of stopping it. So naturally I would come to the remaining family of the Rosatos. But now I see why these members of the family were never watched. Not even an ounce of potential in all of them. However, my goal was never them. After all, if any had the potential, I would have known about it years ago." "What is your intention, Yoshimitsu?" Mitsuru asked. "I've already achieved what I came to do, here in Tokyo. Or perhaps all of you have forgotten," Yoshimitsu grinned before looking up to the sky. "Minato may be brain dead, but his body is perfectly alive." "What?" Hamuko blinked. "His body. Where did you take my Onii-chan? Since when? Why hadn't anyone said anything about this?" Yukari gasped. "When did they move his body to Tokyo?" "That's right, a man claiming to be a relative of Minato said his body was to remain permanently on life support," Mitsuru said just loud enough for them all to hear. "I couldn't have you prematurely pulling the plug. Not until I try out one more experiment that your grandfather had left for me to do. However, I didn't have a suitable test subject until now. The power of shadows, I wonder just how vast they are. If that power can be used to create the dark hour. What would happen if focused on one individual? What if I could reverse time on just that person? Say. To a point before they gave their life? A point before they became a seal and stopping the fall? What do you suppose would happen?" Yoshimitsu grinned and laughed. But Hamuko instantly knew what he was saying and where this was going. "No. If you do that. Then. Onii-chan's seal would break and then." Hamuko shook her head. "Everything he accomplished. You would undo it just to see if you can?" "No, you don't get it." Yoshimitsu suddenly became angry. "That old fool Kirijo, he used all of us. But me. I had to lie and steal from my own brother. And me. I was blinded by the thoughts of success. Of having my own lab. Because of them. I lost my brother and his wife. All that was left was his son and the daughter they thought they had lost." What? Hamuko stumbled as his words hit her. "You apostrophe re. You're. I am Rosato Yoshimitsu. And now for the sake of your brother. You must surpass him." Yoshimitsu yelled as a gigantic shadow fell onto the road in front of them. "Come to the Moonlight Bridge on the 19th. There. We will bring all of this to an end." "Yoshimitsu!" Hamuko yelled and took a step forward, but then she was pulled back by Yukari and Kana. "Snap out of it, Hamuko!" Yukari said, forcing Hamuko to look at her. Yukari's features softened. "One thing at a time, okay?" Hamuko nodded and moved forward towards the shadow and took a stance. "This is not your night, Shadow. You're going to be my punching bag." A tarot card came floating down in front of her as she spun her Naginata over her head and brought it down through the card. Persona. November 4, 2009, Dark Hour. It must not have been that long because Minato had been semi-conscious in the transit to wherever they were now. He had felt it in one swift motion as Aegis had tied him to something. Something resembling a cross, because as he opened his eyes. He saw that he was more or less being crucified. Not just him but all of C's was on the roof. Well, nearly all of them. Minato hadn't forgotten about Koromaru. It was the only element Minato was able to control in this situation. The one individual that Akatsuki would overlook. And as Minato looked down at Aigis, he was sure that it wouldn't take too much to push Aigis off of whatever control he was exerting over her. Minato had to wager that however it was she was capable of using a persona would also be very capable of foregoing hardwired coding as a mechanical maiden. After all, having a persona meant she was more than capable of thinking for herself. Minato took a few moments to take in his surroundings. This place was not part of Tartarus proper. No, if Minato had to take a guess, it was actually the observatory portion of the school. There was no reason to suspect it wouldn't be affected by the dark hour transformation like the rest of the school. But maybe that was what this place was used for here as well. The observatory offered a decent view of the rest of the tower, but also the rest of town as well. A few moments passed before Minato realized that Aigis had brought up another individual. One Minato had forgotten to calculate into the equation. What is going on here? The man being restrained by Aigis was none other than Mitsuru's father, Takeharu. What the hell? The surprised voice was Junpei. It looked like everyone else was waking up. Minato was in no position to keep the rest of his team calm. He swore at himself. Minato should have known better. He could have persuaded them to stay at the dorm. Could have made them wait away from here while he faced down Akatsuki. He could have easily taken out the man and gotten the explanation later. He should have realized that he would end up using Aigis. Now he had screwed up big time. He had led them all here because he didn't take the time to think about how he should approach it. After all this time. How could he have been so careless? What is this? Yukari wasn't that far from him, but Minato needed to focus and ensure he had all the information he could get. He couldn't allow another screw-up. Father! Mitsuru yelled out. Minato could only hope Takeharu was more prepared than he had been. Akatsuki. What is the meaning of this? Takeharu demanded. Minato had a feeling that Takeharu had never trusted Akatsuki, but much like Minato had no proof behind it. They only had a gut feeling that something was off about him. Now Minato was regretting that neither of them had taken any steps to counter this potential outcome. It is just as it appears. They are to be sacrifices. Harbingers of the fall. The arrangements are complete, the prophecy shall be fulfilled. Akatsuki laughed and held his hands up to the moon. What? The disbelief in Akihiko's voice said a lot to Minato. They had known him longer than any of them. Akihiko and Mitsuru both had been working with him for years. No wonder they had trusted him so implicitly. It was also the only reason that made Minato pause instead of voicing his distrust in front of his senpai. Hearing that pain in Akihiko's voice. The realization that this man they had trusted was betraying them. No, not only that, but was about to execute all of them. And for some ridiculous end-of-the-world scheme. You son of a bitch. I'm gonna rip your head off. Junpei growled as he uselessly pulled on what strapped him to the cross. Then Aigis raised one of her hands to the back of Takeharu's head. Akatsuki grinned as the look of realization crossed everyone in C's. You traitor! Are you insane? Takeharu was intentionally drawing the attention away from C's. Minato took the opportunity to look at his bindings. They were a simple rope. He curled his hand and reached to the cuff of his sleeve and tugged at it. Of course not. You know, your father was an unlucky man. Even you, his son, after all this time, do not understand his vision. Akatsuki took a few steps towards Takeharu, his attention on him completely. Minato pulled a razor blade free and immediately went to work on the rope. He needed to get it done quickly. Takeharu was in grave danger. Minato needed to even the odds. My father was wrong. Death as a deliverance. That is not an ideology anyone should embrace, Takeharu countered. Minato doubled his efforts. He needed to hurry. Takeharu was making Akatsuki too angry. Fool. You are but a nuisance now. Akatsuki looked at the mechanical maiden. Minato felt his heart quicken as he knew he had no time left. Aegis adjusted her aim at the back of Takeharu's skull and they heard the cocking of a gun. "Wait. Please, Aegis." "No." Mitsuru was uselessly struggling against her binding but her words did reach Aegis. Minato felt the first rope snap free, but it wasn't quite loose enough, but it was easier to cut through the next cord. "What are you doing, Aegis?" Ikusuke shook his head and then reaches into his jacket and pulls out a gun. 10 years. I've wasted 10 long years. I'm not like your father. I won't make any exceptions. Minato snapped through the last cord and was able to free his hand, but because it was also what was holding him up he suddenly swung awkwardly to the other side but he quickly reached up and sliced through the rope with the razor blade. But all his attempts were not quick enough. Takeharu broke free from Aegis and reached into his own jacket to pull out his own weapon. Then both Akatsuki and Takeharu fired. At that close range. Neither of them would miss. Still Minato hit the ground and rushed towards Takeharu, passing a dazed Aegis who was still fighting the control of Akatsuki. "Father! Father!" Mitsuru was screaming. "I couldn't do it. I failed," Takeharu muttered as he stumbled back but Minato grabbed him. "Takeharu-san. Minato quickly looked at his wounds. There was no way to save him. He was fading quickly. "I wanted to save the youth from the mistakes of the past. None of you should have had to take up this fight. I'm sorry. Mitsuru. I love you and so proud of the woman you've become." Takeharu reached out towards the voice of his daughter. Then his arm went limp. And Minato felt the last beat of Takeharu's heart. "Aegis. We'll finish this. Execute the sacrifices, now," Akatsuki said holding his side where he had been shot. Aegis moved and pointed her weapons down at Minato. He simply looked up at her and he noticed her eyes returning to normal. "Aegis, you know what to do," Minato said as she nodded and turned towards the others and open-fired. After a moment all of C's was free from their bones and standing down in front of Akatsuki. "Damn it, you defective machine," Akatsuki muttered as he stumbled back. Minato put Takeharu slowly to the ground and picked up his gun. "You understand nothing, Akatsuki," Minato growled with an anger and ice that had never been in his voice before. Akatsuki scrambled for the remote in his pocket. He wanted to take control of Aegis again. However, Koromaru, who had been waiting in the shadows, leaped out and in a single swipe took the device away from him. Koromaru came to Minato's side as he took a few steps forward, a pistol aiming straight at Akatsuki. Minato covered in Takeharu's blood. "You're the one that doesn't understand. This useless, pathetic world will gradually fester over time. Only its destruction can bring about its salvation." Akatsuki brought his gun up again, pointing it at Minato. "Rosato, I should have known you would cause me trouble eventually." Minato narrowed his eyes and slowed his breathing. When Akatsuki moved his gun hand. Minato fired. "I told you it wouldn't go as you planned. Now shut up and die." Akatsuki dropped his gun and stumbled back, cradling 2 gunshot wounds in his chest as he made his way towards the edge. His glare at Minato didn't cease, but the realization of his death quickly dawned on him. "I would have ruled the world. I was so close." Then he disappeared off the edge of the observatory. Minato lowered the gun and turned back to the others. All of them, save Mitsuru, were looking at him with concern. Koromaru nudged his hand with his nose. He looked down to see that Koromaru was equally as concerned for him. But Minato felt the tears coming down his face anyway. He stumbled forward to where Mitsuru was. Holding her deceased father. Minato collapsed to his knees next to Takeharu. "One time, my father made a promise. He swore that he would atone for endangering our generation, even if it cost him his life. But I wanted him to live. I became a persona user to protect him," Mitsuru said between tears. "I'm sorry. All of you." Minato felt his own tears falling down his face as he looked down at Takeharu. "I failed you all. I should have seen this coming. I should have been prepared. I should have had plans. I should have." His breathing became more rapid and his words quickly became cries. He was so angry. So disappointed in his lack of ability. He didn't even realize when Yukari had pulled him into her embrace. Another person had died under his watch. No. No more. He would never let this happen again. Not to his friends. Never again. No matter what the cost.